Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Line Change, the NHL betting podcast from the Action Network. My name is Michael Leboff, and joining me for this, our second of 4 season preview episodes for the 2023-24 NHL season, will be Nick Martin. We already did the Western Conference. We went team by team, gave out a bunch of bets. So if you haven't listened to that, be sure to check it out on our Line Change feed. Spoiler alert. A lot of talk about the Arizona Coyotes and their head coach, Andre Tourigny, in there. And we'll talk about him again on the awards betting episode, I'm sure. But this one is about the Eastern Conference, and the Eastern Conference sets up, I guess the entire league does, but the Eastern Conference especially sets up kind of like the Kentucky Derby to me. Like, it's a deep field. These horses are just going to be bumping into each other the entire season, and you can kind of poke holes in the favorites, and you can make cases for some of the long shots, and there's going to be a ton of people kind of invested the entire race as this thing gets towards the stretch. So pretty excited. We'll start in the Atlantic Division. We're going to go team by team, starting with the favorite in the division, all the way down to the Montreal Canadiens here, and that's the Toronto Maple Leafs. They're the favorite to win the Atlantic. The new look Maple Leafs, sort of. Kyle Dubas, your man, is in Pittsburgh now, running that ship. The Leafs are 9-1 to win the Stanley Cup. 106.5 is their over/under. The division is 2-1. I think both of us are in agreement here. Like, I feel like you could have made and you did. You would make salient arguments for this team and the upside at these kind of numbers last season, but I do think that there's potential for a step back here. Well, whether that step back is massive enough that they miss the playoffs is very unlikely, but there's just more question marks surrounding this team than there were going into last year or the season before that. And I'm talking legitimate question marks, like tangible ones, not just, is this team cursed?
Yeah. Well, some people, I think, tried to fade them last year to make the playoffs. I wouldn't do that again. Their top guys are too much better than everyone else's top guys. So the floor is too high, I think, is a fair way to summarize it. But as someone who liked the Leafs last year, I'm not buying onto the train of people who now think they've made the right adjustments, bringing in Reeves and Domi. And I like Bertuzzi in particular as the one out of those guys that I think is actually really good. But in general, I'm not viewing them as better than last season. Maybe when they get to the playoffs, that those adjustments are what they need to finally get over the hump. And the other thing is, I think at the end of the day, they're playing good enough there that maybe they could make some noise, whether it involved changes or not. But I don't view them as a team I want to bet to win the cup yet, or a team that I want to bet on their over specifically. I still think the floor is high, but I don't necessarily see how those new guys make them much better. And the defense core too, who knows how, like, if that could end up actually being worse. As much as people rip on them, their defensive play has been pretty great the last 3 years, if you actually believe in any of the underlying numbers at all. So I don't really see how that actually ends up better. And you look at a guy like Max Domi, for example, who's getting a ton of hype as someone people love in
I
this
wonder
league.
why. Maybe it's because his dad played there and punched a lot of
Yeah.
people in the face.
Yeah, exactly. And he's
and
not even that much
talked
of
to
a
the media and gave the media a good quote.
Yeah, exactly. Say all the right things. But at the end of the day, they had some pretty good two-way players that aren't there now. And basically for me, I mean, they might win the division, but I don't think it's a great bet at plus 200. They might go over 106, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I don't think there's anything you need to get involved with.
Yeah, this team feels like a step back is in order just because of the way the roster is constructed. It's very strange to me because, like you said, the two-way play was so good that it was able to make them still like an elite team, despite Austin Matthews missing time and taking time to get going and having a quote unquote down season for him, even though he scored 40 or so. And a lot of that was just injury related. But now you're looking at, like you said, Domi, Tyler Bertuzzi, who I like as a player a lot, but not as a two-way force. John Klingberg, who knows how he plays. Then the bottom six with Ryan Reeves, and there is, the value's not there on them to miss the playoffs because it's just never there on these elite teams. It should be like, they should be like 30-1 to miss the playoffs, really. I'm being a little egregious, but you get the point. But there is a path to implosion here. Now, that said, I think there is a bet or two that if you want to back the Leafs, you can make. And my favorite would be Ilya Samsonov to win the Vezina. Because if you think they are going to be a team that's going to be up there for 106 points, like their over-under is 106.5, so 50-50 that they go over or under 106.5, he should rack up wins. I don't believe that they're just going to hand the keys over to Joseph Woll, and I get that he's looked good in a small sample, but I mean, it's one thing to do it in 8 or 9 games and another to do it across an entire season. And Sammy, once again, is in a contract year, looked great for them last year at times. So that would be the only one. It's 50-1, so it's long enough to be interesting and to see a path if they are good. But the defensive issues even kind of water that bet down as well. So I don't think you can classify them as a straight fade, but I do think that they're a tad overrated going into the year. Similarly, the Bruins, they're 16-1 to win the Cup, 1-6-1. The over/under is 101.5 in the division. It's plus 350. Of course, you know what, record-setting regular season, but now they're going to be without Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci, to a lesser extent Bertuzzi and Dmitry Orlov, who they didn't join until the stretch run anyway. So it's one thing to get into Krejci and Bergeron, and another to get into those two guys. But they also had Vezina winning season from Linus Ullmark. So any sort of regression from Ullmark then diminishes the margin for error, and the margin for error has already been significantly diminished because of Krejci and Bergeron leaving. So there's a path to a really poor season, I think, here for Boston compared to their market value.
Yeah, my favorite play involving the Bruins is backing them to miss the playoffs at plus 210. I think it's quite reasonable. You even just look at Allmark going back to what he's been, or closer to what he's been historically, not winning every single one-goal game. That already drops off a lot of points, and then there's going to be a lot more pressure from the bottom of the division. I mean, you have to assume the Sabres and Sens pay off a little bit with their expectations here, so that's enough of an argument for me with Bergeron gone that I think plus 210 is a decent number. You're kind of just needing a little bad luck with injuries. I think it's going to happen a little more often than that number suggests that they let down.
Yeah, I would agree with you too. And I think that famous last words. But if you are going to bet the Bruins, this is exactly what I said last year, and it worked out brilliantly. You can probably wait if you really want to bet them, because this is not a team that's going to, I don't think, shorten too much past 16-1, the teens. But they should be a really tough out in the playoffs regardless if they get in, and then you probably could get a better number. So don't rush to bet the Bruins. I'll say it again this year. So perhaps pencil them in for another historically good season. The Florida Panthers, another team that you're going to go against here, they're 16-1 to win the Stanley Cup as well. Very similar futures portfolio to the Bruins, 99.5 over under, and 4-1 to win the division. I think my biggest, we hear a lot about the injuries. There's not a lot of people talking about that this team needed elite goaltending to get to past elite goaltending to go on their run last season in the playoffs. So that's just very unlikely to happen again with Spencer Knight and Sergei Bobrovsky over the course of a season. They also needed Alex Lyon to play out of his mind to get them into the playoffs in goal. And he's gone. Not that he would have done it anyways, made a difference in terms of betting their season-long stuff anyway. So like the Bruins, I think like the Leafs, and this is going to be a theme in this entire division, I think that there's a very clear path to things going awry for Florida as well.
Yeah, I think so. They're less of a fade candidate than I once thought they were going to be. Like at first, when the playoffs ended, I was like, I really, really hope people inflate their numbers a lot. They've already got some injuries. I don't think the defense core is that good. And with their price of plus 170 to miss the playoffs, it's not a play that I love like I was counting on loving when the finals ended, but I still think it's a very reasonable play. The defense is pretty thin. I do like the Evan Rodriguez signing a lot. I think that helps them. It seems like Spencer Knight's in a good place entering the year and that maybe he bounces back. So I'm not as low on the goaltending as maybe I once thought, but just with the pressure coming up from the bottom of the division and kind of those concerns, I think plus 170 is also a good enough number to bet on them to miss the playoffs.
All right, let's keep this train rolling. I think because you're going to hear a lot of people who are going to be picking against this team, I think. and that's the Lightning at 20-1 to win the Stanley Cup. They're 96.5. That's the over/under they've been slapped with, and the division odds 6-1. I talked about the Calgary Flames a little bit in our Western Conference preview, saying a team that I'm having trouble with. Just I could see it going in 100 different directions, and I do expect the Lightning to just be strong enough and good enough, and the power play to be so good that it will mask over a lot of issues. The goaltender obviously is all world. Mikhail Sergachev is a number one defenseman. Then you got Hedman and Chernak behind him. We both like Michael Eyssimont. Like, this is still a really good team, but I think people are just so fatigued by them that I was thinking we'd get maybe a little bit of a better number, and I could have some fun with Tampa. And I do have a bet related to Tampa that I'll give out in a second, but I'm just interested to see what you think, because you were much lower on them than I was basically all last year, and turned out to be right. Hello, everybody. This is Michael Leboff with a quick insert here. We recorded our Eastern Conference preview before news came down that Andrei Vasilevsky, the goaltender for the Tampa Bay Lightning, and obviously a massive part of their success, would be out for around 8 weeks. This news does change our outlook on the Lightning a little bit. Obviously, it takes them down a notch and also raises up teams like Ottawa and Buffalo a little bit in their quest to unseat a team like Tampa Bay to make the playoffs in the Atlantic Division. So please just keep that in mind as you listen to our preview for the Tampa Bay Lightning and the rest of the Atlantic Division.
Yeah, I don't even know if I think I'm that right. They played the Leafs pretty well last season. I'm with you. I still think they're in the mix. To me, they just look like fair market value. They've got those guys that keep the floor so high. It seems like sometimes people almost underrate these teams that have like players like Kucherov point, and we just know that those are going to be superstars who dominate. The depth continues to get hit with the cap situation, and the other thing is, who knows how good Victor Hedman really is now. Like, this is kind of a pretty good sample now where maybe he's a little overrated, and I think that hurts their ceiling a little bit, but I view that as pretty fair numbers. They'll be in the mix. I still think they're a pretty strong side. So yeah, probably just about fair market value in my opinion.
The one bet I do like here is Mikhail Sergachev as a Norris Trophy bet. He's 100-1. It seemed pretty obvious last year that John Cooper had no issue just handing the keys to the power play to Sergachev, especially in important games, to that elite power play. So he should be able to rack up the necessary points. I think he jumped from 38 to 64 just in terms from with an even bigger role in another year into his prime. I think Sergachev, as a two-way force, he's the type of guy that doesn't necessarily need to lead defensemen in points to win the Norris, and he's 100-1. So that's a bet I can get behind. It's just that the concern is, do they keep Hedman off of his minutes?
I think that's a good bet. He's going to be the clear number one this year. I'm kind of willing to stick behind that, because the other thing is, even if Hedman's kind of bounces back, are they really going to want to push him too much? They should still be hopefully in a decent situation, and maybe this year they've got a little bit more of an edge in the regular season with kind of how it went. But yeah, I think that is a good bet and a reasonable number to get on a fun guy.
Okay, so we're going to get to the section of the division that I think everybody was just going to be talking about ad nauseum in season previews for the next couple of weeks. Buffalo Sabres, they're 35-1 to win the Stanley Cup. They are 35. I think that's a little crazy, but 92.5 over under, and the division is 9-1. I knew this was coming. You knew this was coming. Anyone who's been betting NHL long enough knew that this was coming, that bookmakers were just going to be prepared for the Sabres to be a trendy sleeper, and they were able to kind of just adjust their numbers to a spot where it looks a little crazy to me. I totally get if Buffalo Sabres fans out there are happy to bet the Sabres at 35-1, because hell, it's supposed to be fun. You're supposed to have fun betting, and it's just too much though. Like, they could score. We know that. They've got a serious ceiling in terms of offensive production, but do you trust this team defensively and in goal to make good on these numbers?
I'm still on a little bit of a buy at those numbers. I played the division at 10-1. I think the Sabres pay off, and to couple them in. I think the Senators probably pay off too, which is where my like for the Panthers and Bruins to miss that were those props. I think that's a big part of that reason, obviously. Um, I like what they've got. They could have some forwards maybe take a step back, like maybe Tage steps back a little bit, but they can also handle that with some of the depth coming up. And I think Levi, I'm willing to get into that hype train. Like I think he can easily be in the Calder mix. He's looking really good in preseason, and it's preseason, so who really cares? But he looks pretty sharp, and I think that he can pretty much be a number one goaltender this year, which makes me want to buy into them a little bit. And then Power and Dahlin both should be so good this season. So those are kind of the cases for Buffalo here. There's still some weaker guys down the lineup and on the back end, but I like Buffalo. I think they're probably getting closer to fair value, but and they're such a fun team. Like I do really enjoy watching the Sabres right now. So yeah, I'm in on some of the Sabres stuff.
So part of my trepidation with Ottawa with Buffalo has to do with the team we'll talk about next, and that's Ottawa. I guess we can couple them together. I think the difference between Buffalo and the Senators in terms of looking at a full 82 game season is like at least we've seen the Senators goaltending, obviously not together as a tandem, but we know that we can at least get decent goaltending out of them for full season. I just don't know if I can trust Devin Levi to hold up maybe when we get to like February 3rd. Like where is he going to be and stuff? And if I'm wrong about it, I'll tip my cap to you and other people back in the Sabres, but I just don't want to get involved on them when you can get the Senators at a better price. Ottawa's 40-1 to win the Stanley Cup, 90.5 over under, and the division is 11-1. I think that and actually, if I had to pick a long shot to win the President's Trophy, this would be the team. Just because we saw the New Jersey Devils have that crazy come up last year doesn't mean we're going to see another team do it. I think a lot of people are making this kind of comparison as if it happens every season. But if I could totally see the Senators being a team that improves by 20-ish points and is in the race for the President's Trophy, because the division just shouldn't be as tough as it's been over the past 5-6 years for them. Yeah, it's deep. The division's deep. There's a lot of good teams, but the elite teams Tampa was elite for so long. Toronto was elite for so long. Boston was elite for so long. Florida was elite for the past couple of seasons. And they're not anymore. They've all taken a step back. So there's a path here for Ottawa to just go on a run and stay there. Korpisalo, like he was really good down the stretch last year when he was healthy. What we've seen out of Anton Forsberg when he's been healthy has been good. I like the back end actually a little bit more than I thought I was going to coming into the year. I like the young D should just keep getting better. The Shane Pinto situation is a little concerning because having Josh Norris be an injury doubt and then no number 2 center to kind of just fill in for him for a while is a problem. But if Pinto gets resolved and Norris is healthy, down the middle with Stützle, Norris, Pinto, and then the back end with Shabbat and Chikrin, it's a great first pairing. Jake Sanderson showed out really, really well last year. I like Artem Zub, and then a back, the number 6 defenseman with Hamonic, and a number 5 is with Brandstrom, just not terrible. So I think that there's just enough here to like Ottawa more than Buffalo, and the prices are just a little bit higher on Ottawa. So I think that's part of my thinking here. Doesn't mean you can't like both teams. And
yeah, I do. And I think that the Senators to make the playoffs at plus 130 is a really good bet. And you went through all the reasons. Josh Norris by himself will help a lot because that's a legitimate top 6 center. So if he can stay healthy, that already helps so much compared to last year. Sanderson should be better, or I shouldn't even say should be better because he was pretty strong last season, but that's 3 really good D-men that I'm willing to back. Goaltending could be good. So I agree with you. As a President's Trophy, super long shot. They're pretty much exactly what the Devils were last year. I think they could pay off and be competitive in that market. So yeah, I like that. I'm in on buying the Senators. I think Kubalik too is another player that I still like. Who knows how he does with another change of scenery. So the upside is there for the Senators to hopefully finally pay off. I think they might be one of the, it seems almost like there's quite a cockiness amongst the group and the fans for like not really doing a lot and being so proud to have locked in their players. But with that said, now's the time. And the hype's been coming up for too many years. All the guys are locked in now. Now's the time for them to actually come through and do something. And I do think the talent is there. So to me, I look at to make the playoffs plus 130. Even with my respect for Buffalo, I see it as like closer to 50-50. Like I think if you're giving a fair projection on them to make the playoffs, that's probably about 50%. So plus 130 seems like a really good number to me in that debate.
I do think that Brady Tkachuk is an interesting flyer as well for Rocket Richard. The guy just shoots the puck so much that if he can finally find a way
Like,
to finish a little bit better, a little
yeah,
bit better,
I don't know if I can get on that one.
he just
I think he also
oh
crams
god,
the
man,
puck in some of these rebound sequences,
I
just like
know.
from a foot away into the guy's pads. But I love Kachuk, and I like Stützle too. They're
Yeah,
like,
Stützle is the other one. I like Stützle as a Hart Trophy super long shot at 100-1 as well. Like, in other words, just this. I think the Senators they're gonna be a team that uh, pays off in one of these ways as we get deeper into the season. So, um, yeah, Ottawa. On to Detroit, kind of fallen by the wayside because the three of these teams were kind of banded together as the come up as teams on the ascendancy, but Detroit's not got there yet. They're 75-1 to win the Stanley Cup, 85.5 to is their over under, and 25-1 to win the division. Yeah, really not much here. I think this looks about right. A team that's upside is they can surprise and grab a fifth spot in the playoffs if the Atlantic gets 5, but also it's more likely than not that it's just another kind of middling season for Detroit.
yeah, they made. I think a lot of people have kind of discussed this, but those moves signing the veteran D that they brought in, like I don't really see how Sherratt, Hall, or Petrie will be that good. So that just kind of caps them. When you're looking at these other teams on the come up, they've got pretty legit defenders, whereas on Detroit, you're really only excited about Wallman and Seider. And even then, Wallman, who knows if he's going to be as strong as he was last year. So yeah, for me, they're the clear third out of those, the Senators, Sabres pack with them. And they're priced as such. But yeah, I am pretty much on the fade Detroit train here this season.
Yeah, I think also when they traded for DeBrincat, I think a lot of people got excited for a second and then realized, well, he doesn't really solve their biggest issues. So, makes them better, sure, and he takes away a score from the division rival, but didn't really work out with him in Ottawa either. So I'm not too worried about that. Anyway, so yeah, Detroit is the clear team peg to finish 7th, and there's a very clear team to finish last in the Atlantic. The Canadiens are at plus 250. The over under 70.5. Excuse me, they're 250-1 to win the Stanley Cup. They're over under 70.5, and to win the division, they're 200-1, and it's very clear. It's not much we need to get into here. What's going to happen here? I do think that their offensive upside is probably good enough to make them a decent over team throughout the season, but curious your thoughts here on Montreal.
Yeah, I don't have a lot here.
And when I say over team, I mean game by game. Like I feel like these games could be just
I think there's a
bombshells.
world where they're as scrappy as Detroit. I might end up looking like an idiot for saying that, but I still feel like they showed some decent things. I love Caulfield. I think you could probably go in on him. What was his? We talked about some of the prices to score 40 goals. His is probably playable. I think I'm willing to bet on him, and that's about it. I still think the floor of this team is pretty low and that they're pretty reasonably priced here.
Yeah, I don't hate the line of thinking that they could just be not finish last and hang around Detroit. They were ravaged by injuries last year
100%.
too, so just being
and
a little
they've
bit
been pretty
healthier.
competitive under St. Louis. Like it does seem.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to really slight them. I think they're kind of appropriately priced. And if anything, I almost see them as a reason why some of these top teams might still get slightly less points than expected at the top of the division, just because I actually do still see them as a pretty competitive team, kind of relative what they are. So I wouldn't be surprised if they shock and they're kind of close to Detroit and not a complete joke.
Caulfield is 50-1 to lead the Atlantic Division in scoring. Probably not
He's,
long enough. Kachuk is
he's
50-1 too.
plus 350 to score 40, which I feel like I like about evenly with our guy Kyle Connor. Maybe a little less than Connor, but I think those are both happening more often than plus 350 suggests, and pretty much just need some decent health there.
Yeah, health. It's all about health. All right, so that wraps up the Atlantic, and now on to the Metro. Both of these divisions are pretty deep, but the Metro, I think the top is just a lot stronger, the top two teams, than it is in the Atlantic. But I do have a lot to say about some of the teams in the middle of the Metro. Carolina is the Stanley Cup favorite. They are 8-1 to win the Cup. They are the division favorite in the Metro at plus 180, and they have the highest over under in the NHL at 109.5 points. And that kind of speaks to where we're at in the NHL this year. I kind of talked about that Kentucky Derby uh, feel it has. The favorite's 8-1. Last couple of seasons, the Stanley Cup favorite was a clear favorite. It was Colorado at plus 350 or plus 425 when the season started. We don't have that this year. We just have a glut of teams and between 8 and 13, 14-1. So I don't disagree that Carolina is the Cup favorite. Another team, I talked about Dallas and how pundits are going to talk about how the Stars are their sleeper pick to win the Stanley Cup, even though they're 14-1 and expected to be a 100-point team, and it's a little cheeky to call a team like that a sleeper. But there's so many people picking the Hurricanes, and the line of thinking is like, this is the year they finally break through. This is the year they finally break through. They've been one of the best teams in the NHL for so long now, so I get why people are pointing it that way. But it's not like this is some underdog story coming out of Carolina. This is the Stanley Cup favorite for a reason. How do these prices look to you for the Hurricanes?
Yeah, they look about fair. If anything, I think maybe this year I'd rather attack the playoffs. I always wonder if at some point I just get the feeling that they push so hard in the regular season. Like it's so relentless the way that they go. And I don't even think really last year they ran out of gas. Like we saw how Brendan Moore reacted, that he basically couldn't even accept that the series was 4-0, and I kind of agree with him. So they're really good. I don't really think there's many knocks against the Canes. They're deep pretty much everywhere. Got some top end talents. I rightfully priced to win the division. I think we're going into the Devils next year. I think I kind of prefer the Devils upside with the slightly better prices a little bit in terms of regular season markets, but I think the Canes are a very valid Cup favorite again this season.
Yeah, the Devils are 9-1 to win the Cup, so right behind Carolina. 107.5 over under and plus 240 to win the division. Carolina and New Jersey, I think, are both. I talked about how you can kind of poke holes in all the favorites, and for both teams, with Carolina, I think the way that their style of play and just the toll it takes on them in the regular season is sure that's a one way to look into it. I also think you can question what's the goaltending situation is going to be like with Carolina, but you can definitely question it with New Jersey. But that offense is just so deep, and the blue line could even take a step forward if Luke Hughes is the goods. That it might not factor in at all here. So yeah, you bought the Devils a lot last year. You're just going right back to
Yeah,
them this
I'm
season.
back on the Devils. I think this team is still really, really good. Their top stars are legit stars. Even Hughes and so on, I don't necessarily think they're going to step back. I think he's just this good. He's drafted first overall as one of the more touted picks for a reason. He's so talented. I think Brad is legitimately just as good as he's shown. Maybe they get a little more out of Meyer with the whole offseason to kind of get him meshed in and training camp and that sort of thing. I think there's upside there. They have depth at pretty much every position. They're young. All the guys that played good last year, I'm willing to put faith in. Like I think Dawson Mercer, excellent player. I think he follows up last season. And then you look at the back end, and the losses are what they are, but I think it's so realistic that Hughes and Nemec can come through and counteract those, and if not add upside with how good they can be. So for me, I actually don't think they fall off. I think they come through relative to what they did last season, and that they will still be in the mix for the President's Trophy again. Had a tough loss on that one last year because of what Boston did, but at a shorter number, I'm still willing to get in on it. I think the Devils are going to be really good.
I'm interested in Timo in the Rocket Richard. I know Jack Hughes shoots a ton, but so does Timo, and maybe they spread it out too much. But he's in like the 50s and 60s, and this team should score a ton, and he's just in such a good spot. The power play should be good, and he's just going to ride
Yes,
shotgun
and
with
you
a
gave
really
me a
good
good
player.
refresher because we were about to slide by. I know we'll go into this too. I think Nico Hischier to win Selke, and what I've seen is the first year the award is bettable, is a really solid bet. Like we talked about it. I wouldn't bet on anyone in this market who's not discussed as kind of that next guy up in the defensive spectrum. And with Bergeron gone, the market's so wide open. So Hischier's a chalk at plus 500, but I still think that's a really good bet. I'll be shocked if it goes to someone who wasn't like discussed by the media as like like the defensive forward darling. It does still seem like it has to be someone who's quite noteworthy, and like I don't think it'll go to someone who's just a pure defensive forward that dominates on that front, like something like a Jordan Staal, even if maybe that's probably like kind of fair. I think Hischier's definitely going to be in the mix. Plus 500 is a good number for me. If he stays healthy, I have full faith, and he does everything for them. So I like that.
Okay, this is where it gets. I feel like I'm going a little nuts, but maybe I probably am. But also, the Rangers are 13 to win the Stanley Cup. I'm seeing people out there think it's a good number. They're 103.5 in terms of their over under, and the division plus 330. Did the Rangers? Putting aside Laviolette for Gallant, did the Rangers get better in the offseason?
Yeah, I'm a little bit on the Rangers fade train. Maybe I'll look dumb here, but I
Yeah.
mean, they're better if Kako, Laffy, Heedle take steps forward, but I'm really not like. And then I guess some people are kind of giving Blake Wheeler credit as someone who could do something, maybe, but and he's got I've kind of seen people talking about his grit and his work ethic and his heart, which is kind of exactly what you heard if you listen, like kind of had your ear to the ground in Winnipeg. It was kind of the exact opposite of all that shit. So I don't know. I'm skeptical of if the Blake Wheeler thing works out. I see it as a bit of like the Patrick Kane scenario for me. I know they didn't it doesn't have as much hype and it's not kind of at that same level, but for me, I'll be a little bit surprised. And I hate going against guys like this because then you just look so dumb if they just purely prove you wrong. But I kind of stood by this on Kane, and I think it's the same thing here. I don't think he magically just turns it around. So I agree with you. And like their upside is still, or their floor is still so solid because of how good Shesterkin is and Fox is so good. But I think the rest of the East, Stars is getting closer to them. I don't think the depth will be that great. So for me, fair to maybe even fade because I think that some of the bottom of the division can push a little bit here.
So yeah, there's a couple other things I'd add. One is the Rangers have been exceptionally healthy for the past 2 seasons, like exceptionally healthy. They're already banged up a little bit in camp, so we'll see how that plays out. I don't, and Artemi Panarin and Mika Zibanejad are great players, but we've probably seen the best of them?
I
I
think
would say.
I
You
still
know,
think Panarin maybe shows a little better, but I mean, you're right. Like
maybe yeah,
even then,
okay, but is it? But even so, uh, then you're now talking about even like someone like Chris Kreider. Like, have we seen the best out of him? Most likely. And then the one thing that's sticking out to me a lot, and I don't think a lot of people are talking about it, is they had a really solid backup goalie last year. Like Yaro Halak was solid. He was one of like a handful of goalies that posted a decent save percentage with over whatever minimum 20 starts or whatever it was. The point is he was really good, and they walked away from him to kind of do another typical Rangers thing, which was let's just go get the name value guy towards the end of his career, Jonathan Quick, Connecticut guy. Drury's a Connecticut guy. Chris Drury, their GM's a Connecticut guy. So there's some connection here. But he's been so bad in goal for a couple years
that's a
now
really
that
good point. Yeah, I really got to.
it's a
I almost let the Quick thing completely slide by there. I definitely fully agree.
it's and it's not insignificant because whether no matter who your goalie is as a starter, uh, you're you're not asking, like, Martin Brodeur played 78 games for the Devils in 2007, 6-7. That would be considered like a war crime these days, right? He's going to play Shesterkin, like the Hellebucks, the Saroses, the Sorokins of the world. They're going to play 60 to 64 games. That means you're relying on 18 games out of your backup at a minimum. That's 36 points. You'd like Shesterkin to be at like 50 starts, 50, maybe a little more, 55, because you want to keep him fresh for the playoffs when he's that important to your team. So let's say they go with 22 starts for Quick. That's 44 points on the table that you're going to be putting this guy in net with a team that's got some serious flaws defensively. Or the other option is, we don't play him often at all. We just ride Shesterkin, and all of a sudden you get to a point where in April or May he's just completely worn out. Or you got Louis Domingue as your other backup. He's a number 3 goalie. So that's one thing. I've talked about the health. Like, I get Laviolette seems to get a surge out of his teams in his first season, but to me, he also doesn't seem like the right type of fit for this group either. He's coming into a very established core veteran group that he's going to rely on, and he's got to find a way to assimilate some young talent into the lineup, and he's just not done that, in his past. And Artemi Panarin and Peter Laviolette don't really seem to be the type of guys. And I know Panarin's played for, John Tortorella in the past. So it's just, but I don't know. I think that there's a lot of ways this falls apart for the Rangers and becomes a very frustrating season. So I guess I am saying that they're a fade candidate and very overrated. And I know I'm an Islander fan, so maybe I'm looking at this through those tinted glasses, but I'll let you kind of.
Well, I might be in a little bit same boat because I do think Laviolette did a really shitty job with some of the cap stuff and the handling. But those could be flaws there. Like, my biggest beefs with him were that they had young guys who were showing well, who were earning more minutes. They weren't even healthy, so it wasn't like it was hard at times to get them in. And I really just don't think he did a very good job with that team the last couple of years. I know that the Caps roster wasn't that good anymore, but it's not like I'm necessarily super scared that he comes in and makes a big difference. It's really that 2021-2022 season of the Rangers that scares me, where it could be something like that, where they just win all of these games where everyone's like, how did they just win that game? So that always is the fear in the back of my mind about fading this team. But I agree. I don't think they're that good. And strictly, like, I'm not saying, like, I don't think playoff team, but I'm looking at top of the Metro odds right now. They're only a little bit shorter than the Devils and Canes. I don't really agree with that at all. I think those teams are way deeper. Their stars are better. Like, who's close to what the Canes have? And their back end so much deeper. Same thing for the Devils. And then I think the Devil stars, you look at Hughes, Meyer, Bratt, Heischer, Mercer getting there.
And the Devils and Hurricanes are built to absorb the rigors of a 82 game season, whereas the Rangers, like, one or two guys go down, and this is it turns into a problem because they've been so pushed against the cap for so long that their depth is just not there. And
and on the back end, it's not bad. I don't want to make it sound like I'm forgetting about.
No, it's not bad. And they have one of the best defensemen in the league.
Keandre Miller's gonna be really good. I think Schneider's really good, but I'm giving credit to that fact. And even Lindgren's still gonna be tough to play against. But giving credit to that fact, I still think they deserve to be pretty far below the Devils and Canes. So
they're 13-1 to win the Stanley Cup. That's ahead of Dallas, Boston, Florida, Tampa, Los Angeles. I don't know. To me, it's a little nuts. And the Rangers, they're a New York team, they're a very popular team, and so they'll maybe be a little bit of a premium there. But
they're a team you hate to talk
they're basically
shit about.
In the same
well, maybe you don't, but I was just they're a team I hate to like fade and write articles that they're going to lose and that sort of thing, because it's always like that one random guy on Twitter's whatever in your ear
gonna get you. Yeah, so. Yeah, that doesn't make sense to me. And I'm gonna say a similar thing with the Penguins. Like, the Penguins are the Penguins. They still have Sidney Crosby, and they're talked about like this revered organization in hockey. They deserve it. They made the playoffs for 16, 17 years in a row, whatever it was that ended last year. Won a bunch of cups and all that jazz. They're 28-1 to win the Stanley Cup. So double the odds of the Rangers. So maybe I'm overreacting a little bit, and the over-under is 97.5, and the division is 7-1. But I'll just say that I just don't think that the gap between them and the Islanders, and once again, if you want to take it with a grain of salt, go right ahead. The Islanders shouldn't be double the odds as the Penguins, like across the board either. Because let's talk about what happened to the Penguins last year. They got 82 games out of Sidney Crosby, and they got 82 games out of Evgeny Malkin. That's the first time that's happened, I think, since 2009. They are going to be missing Jake Gensel for a little bit. I know that they brought in Erik Karlsson. That's great, but he doesn't help their cause defensively at all. And they brought back a goaltending tandem, or they're bringing in a goaltending tandem of Tristan Jarry and Alex Nedeljkovic. Like, sure, Jarry has his ups and downs, but what am I missing here that says the Penguins are this much better than the Islanders, maybe, is what I'm saying. Because I think that the Islanders' floor is much more stable than the Penguins, considering the goaltending and the defense. But I don't know. Maybe I'm losing it here because I can't see why this team is being talked about the way they are.
This, I feel like we disagree a little more. I agree on the goaltending is my concern, and definitely the injury thing. If Crosby and Malkin end up out, that could be a flaw. I do think that they've revamped the bottom six from what was a complete joke and a concern that was losing them games to being better. And I like Ryan Graves a lot. So maybe slightly overvalued to be like, I'm 100% not betting minus 180 to make the playoffs, but pretty reasonable. I do think that they're one of the reasons that there'll be more parity in the East, just because I think they push again in this kind of last dance season to make it work. And that's without, like, I do agree. Karlsson helps a lot. It is kind of a weird fit because some of his greatest strengths are like what Chris Letang's already doing, but still, Karlsson, Graves, better bottom six. I actually can see how they kind of still view them as a pretty strong team.
Yep, but I think that the biggest thing here is it's in my mind, it's very likely you're going to see, and even Karlsson too has an injury issues, right?
Karlsson will regress.
You're relying on
I think if you're a fantasy player, if you're
exactly.
a Norris better, I'm on Fade Karlsson train.
Yeah. So putting Gensel aside because of the injury, you're relying on a big four of Malkin, Crosby, Karlsson, and Letang. The injury risk there is insane, and I think this is something that a lot of people who handicap hockey and make projections overlook is what are the chances that this team doesn't run into an injury cluster? Like, are we not going to be talking about Pittsburgh in December and January and being like, man, they're just so banged up. It's so hard to get behind this team right now.
I think it's possible, but
I think their injury risk, not only is it high in terms of like the players they rely on, but if it does go pear-shaped for them, it lowers their ceiling probably more significantly, has a potential to sink them maybe more than any other team in the league.
Yeah. I mean, if I had to summarize, I think they are going to get there. I see what you mean because those guys can get hurt, but they're also still so good. Like Crosby was insane last season. They were just losing games because that third line was such a joke, and goaltending was pretty middling, but I still think it seems like they've sorted some of the stuff out. But who knows if it gets on the wrong foot too. One thing I haven't seen yet is first coach fired odds. Maybe we'll go into that a little later, but they could be a team that potentially, like, just sometimes teams that are like pretty good, their coaches are priced way too long in that market. So Sullivan would be one I'd watch if he was like, whatever, one of the ones way down the board, because I think if it did go off the rails, they would be really aggressive to try something to get it going. But yeah, I'm kind of on Penn's bounce back team, or just kind of view it that way this season. If they get decent goaltending, I think they should be pretty solid.
Yeah, I might just be on an island here with the Pens and both the Pens and the Rangers struggling to claw their way into the playoffs compared to what I'm reading. And maybe I'm wrong, but I think that the division is tough. The conference is so tough that I think that these are taller mountains to climb for both of them than the odds suggest. The Islanders now, I'll just like flip it over to you right away because I am an Islander fan. I'll let you get the conversation started. They're 50-1 to win the Stanley Cup, 92.5 as their over under, and 15-1 to win the division. So basically the same as they were going into last
I
year.
look at that as fair. I think, would we say, what is it, like plus 110, 115 to make the playoffs? That sounds about right to me.
Yep.
I think there's a world.
That's about what
They've
they
got
are
the
every year.
Vezina favorite. And I mean, there's definitely some things to like. I still love Barzal, like Horvat, I like Engvall, but the upside in those forwards, I think, relative to some of the other teams, isn't that high. So those markets look pretty fair to me.
Yeah. I think most people would say that, suggest it's fair. I think the Islanders kind of fall into that Winnipeg Jets bracket where I could find more reasons to like them as a long shot Stanley Cup bet if you want to find a long shot in the East than going against them. We talked about the Rangers backup goalie. I think that the Islanders having Semyon Varlamov is always overlooked because of Sorokin. That you're not only going to have 60-ish games of Sorokin, but the 20 games that he doesn't play, 25 games he doesn't play, you have a really, really good backup, a guy who could start on a lot of teams. Defensively, I know the numbers took a step back last year, but still they improved as the season went on. And I think another thing that gets maybe glossed over is after the All-Star break, which is when they traded for Horvat, they played at a 104-point pace. And that was without Barzal, and it was without JG Pageau. And I know Pageau's not a needle mover, but what it did is it meant that Horvat was basically their only top 9 center on the roster. So he had to play both a number 1 center role and also a number 3 center role. And Casey Cizikas and Brock Nelson were the other 2 centers, but they didn't want to play their 4th center, which was either like Otto Koivula or Andy Andrioff, depending on the night. So there was a lot of things that could have really blown up the Islanders season and it didn't. And so much of that credit has to go to Sorokin. But I don't hate a sprinkle on them as a long shot. Maybe I'm crazy because I am an Islander fan. But the other bet I like is Sorokin to win the Hart. You can find him at 75-ish, 80-ish to 1 to do that. It's going to be so hard to beat Connor McDavid. When we do our awards episode, when we talk about the Hart and the Rocket Richard, like that's just going to be the conversation about it, trying to attach your horse to someone. And I think picking one of the goalies like a Hellebuck or Sorokin or even a Saros, Shesterkin is a decent strategy because it's going to be so hard to compare or so easy to look at McDavid's point totals and compare it to, let's say, another guy we like, Elias Pettersson, and be like, well, McDavid outscored him by 25 points. How can we give this guy the Hart Trophy, even if he dragged Vancouver to the playoffs? Whereas it's a little bit harder to do that with a goalie. So if Sorokin is the Vezina favorite, and it's considering the crop of goalies he's favored above Vasilevsky and Shesterkin, Saros, Hellebuck, if he is that good, he'll be on the Hart conversation. So he's just, his value is so, his number is so inflated because he's the position he plays is the long and short of it. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, I think that would be a reasonable way of attacking it. Like everyone knows they're going to lean on him so heavily if they go anywhere, but it is tough. And then, yeah, like you said, pretty much to open the door for anyone else to win the Hart, you need McDavid to miss like 20 games and not hit 135 points. So, but that is going to happen some of the time.
From my team to your team, the Washington Capitals, they are 80-1 to win the Stanley Cup. Over under of 83.5 points, and the division is 30-1. New coach Spencer Carberry's in town. A couple of additions. Joel Edmondson's already hurt. Max Pacioretty we won't see for a while, so a little weird. But we like Rasmus Sandin. I actually don't think that the back end is a tire fire, and the goaltending's good enough that you could kind of piece together a case for Washington to surprise compared to their odds. But this looks about
I think
right.
it's maybe a touch low, but like they're not going to compete for the cup at all. I do believe in Carberry. As I've already said, I didn't think Laviolette managed things real well last season. And the Edmondson injury is not great, but I'm actually really hoping that Alexeyev then gets some leash to play because he was pretty good last year. And that was one of the arguments that I thought with how the season went last year, how was Laviolette not finding a way to get him some minutes and develop? Not sure. Didn't make a lot of sense. So hopefully he's kind of just a one-to-one replacement that can be competent there. I think Carberry will be better. I'd assume they can figure some new looks out on the power play. It's been so stale. So whatever. Those are kind of the positives. But at the end of the day, I think the reality is that Kuznetsov, Ovi, Backstrom, Oshie just isn't that good of like a core of top stars in the East anymore. And when you look at the teams they're competing with, like even some of the ones that are maybe even considered a little more fringe, like obviously Ottawa, Buffalo, they're not close to those guys. So I still like the depth with guys like Nick Dowd. There's a few more guys that could come in and maybe make a difference, like McMichael. But with that said, I don't think there's a lot to go on here. My guess is that maybe they're like 6 points better than people think, and maybe a little scrappier. And I do like Kemper a lot. Kemper still should help them, keep the floor up quite a bit compared to some of these teams that inevitably have goaltending issues. And Lindgren still, but I don't know. If I had to guess, I'm calling like 87 points.
Yeah, and they're another team. So we talked a lot about the Coyotes in our last episode, and Andre Turigny as a great Jack Adams bet. And I said that not every team is going to correlate to if this team makes the playoffs, their coach is going to be a Jack Adams favorite. But I think that the Capitals are one where if you like them as a chance, as you like their chances of upsetting the odds and making the postseason, Carberry at 35-1 is a decent shout. And I'd much rather bet that than their playoff odds because it's, he's got a lot of narratives going in this direction. It seems to be a guy that the media already likes. They talked about him a lot. Maybe that's because he was with the Leafs, but that would be how I would bet it if I was to back Washington in any way. The two teams at the bottom of the Metro, Philly and Columbus, will start with the Flyers, 150-1 to win the Cup, 75.5 over under, 130-1 to win the division. I think once again, I'm gonna do it again. I think 10-1 to win the Wooden Spoon to finish in last place is not a bad bet on this team. And I know we talked about it last year, and then they played pretty well coming out of the gates. And John Tortorella gets, he's got that reputation for getting the most out of his rosters. But at some point, like, you can't tell me that this roster is that much better than what we're gonna see out of Anaheim and San Jose, Columbus, Montreal. Like, I think Montreal is probably better than uh, Philadelphia, and we don't know what's going on with Carter Hart. We don't know if how much he's gonna play, and the forward depth is. I mean, Morgan Frost, Sean Couturier. Who knows what he's gonna do? I like Noah Cates, but this is their spine for us. Couturier, Cates, and Ryan Poehling. It doesn't inspire a lot of confidence. So yeah, I would play Philly again.
I am a little less wanting to fade them. I think they're priced about fair in that. My concern with that market is just that I think the Ducks and Sharks are so likely to be the two. I think they both deserve to be more favored to be last, but we'll see. Yeah, I really don't have a lot on Philly here. And just to kind of loop back quick, well, we're still kind of close to the Carberry thought. Part of the reason I do think that some of these coaches are going to have value in that market is that I think it's less likely we see. I mean, obviously, we're not going to see a team like Boston last year, but I'm hoping it's less likely we see kind of a runaway President's Trophy team in any fashion, because a lot of times those teams have been the one to scoop up the Jack Adams winner when it's not some team that just sneaks in. So hopefully that helps us with our Turigny bets, Carberry, whoever else in the East that you think could maybe steal it. Probably, could be reasonable to look at having a blank on, Ottawa's coach. But I think those are DJ Smith. I think those are hopefully going to be more in play, and we don't just get beat because some team absolutely goes off this season. Overall, the East should be a lot more competitive. I have faith in kind of a lot of these bottom teams being a little better. So hopefully that really levels things off a bit.
Yeah, and even if those teams the teams that are likely to go off, like Carolina, Brendan Moore just won it. Lindy Ruff was just kind of the runner-up. Like, the voters don't tend to do that. Yeah, the other thing that I like about the Flyers in this wooden spoon market is that they're very committed to tearing this thing down. So I don't think that this roster is going to be even. It's bad already. It's going to be nearly as good as it is even right now. When we get to like February and March.
When we talk about the teardown, one of the reasons I thought Michkov sets up so well that people weren't talking about, other than you really, as we see, he's barely getting minutes, or earlier in the year he wasn't even getting in the games, but it sets up so well for a team doing a teardown because you don't have that guy playing. Now he comes over when you've sat here and torn it down for 3 years to try and time when you're getting this superstar. I think that's an underrated advantage that people haven't thought about. Seems like Brer is actually running the ship pretty intelligently. I like what he's been doing, so I agree with you. I don't think they'd do anything stupid if maybe they won a few more games earlier than they were supposed to. Seems like they'd probably just stick with the plan as is.
The Blue Jackets, I mean, this is a strange one. They're about the same odds as the Flyers, 150-1 to win the Stanley Cup. They are 72.5 as their over under, and division 150-1 as well. It's really hard to figure it out considering what we just saw with like the Mike Babcock situation. Young team, can't trust the goaltending as far as you can throw it. The back end maybe got a little bit better. Plus they're healthier, so you can make that argument. But the division they're playing in makes it so hard to believe that they're going to take a significant step forward here. The one thing I would say is I don't mind Patrick Laine stuff. Backing him in other ways. His supporting cast gets a little bit better, and he's gonna have a different coach than Mike Babcock, who I don't think would have meshed with him. And he's 40-1 to lead the Metro in goals. I think that's a little interesting if he can play 82 games. But yeah, they're just kind of uninteresting to me from a betting perspective.
Yeah, I see them as I think they go slightly over that 73.5 total. I don't know if I would say I agree with the offseason decisions at all, but I think Provorov can bounce back, and I like Damon Severson. They have a lot of young forwards who should show out fairly well. But, I mean, the reason I sit here and say that I don't think the offseason made a lot of sense is because I don't think those moves make them a playoff team. They make them probably, like I see them probably being a little competitive, more so than maybe some people expect. Something like 79, 80 points is kind of what I'm projecting, which is a fair bit above their point total. Again, those, though, I feel like you want such a solid edge to sit there and play like minus 115 for something season long. So, yeah, I think they can be better than people think. I think Fantilli should be pretty strong. Maybe some people are overrating a little bit. I still think there's a pretty massive gap between him and Bedard, but we'll see. I mean, that should be obvious to say, but it seems like people are kind of getting a little trendy on Fantilli to win the Calder here. So we'll see. And he is probably going to get into a way better position in the lineup, or he could very realistically end up in a way better position in the lineup than Bedard. Or I should phrase that as in playing with better line mates, but still, that's a bit of a light case to say this team can be that much better, that they got two defenders. You're kind of hoping one of them bounces back in Provorov, and then they got a rookie, Fantilli, who should be, probably 55, 60 points, I think.
Yeah. I think that they're better than Philly, and the market doesn't.
Yes, I would say. I wonder what that
thing.
head-to-head price is, because that could be an interesting bet to make. Would be the Blue Jackets to specifically be ahead of the Flyers by points. The Flyers are even 2 points higher on what I'm looking at, so that could actually probably be a pretty decent bet.
All right, that's the Eastern Conference. Like I said, we did the Western Conference earlier, so the Monday episode, if you didn't listen to that, please do. And then we will be back with our buddy Tim Kalinowski to preview the awards. I know we touched on a bunch of them here and there over the past two episodes, but this time we'll deep dive into it. So be sure to check that one out. And then we'll summarize our thoughts on the upcoming season with a short form kind of best bets, quick fire, rapid fire preview, which will be out on Thursday. So be sure to check that one out as well. And then we're back Tuesday, October 10th to preview opening night in the NHL. And you'll hear from us quite a bit throughout the upcoming season. For Nick Martin, I'm Michael Leboff. Thank you for listening to Line Change. Please rate, review, and subscribe so we can get more eyeballs on this show as we get into the new season.